Hey BookTube, this is Kelly. Thank you so much for watching my channel, Books I'm Not Reading. I'm here today, as promised, to do a rant, like review, on Ken Mansfield's book, Between Wyomings. Not only am I reading this for Nonfiction November, but I'm also reading it as part of my year-long Curious Adventure project that's hosted by Curious Reader, Natalie at Curious Reader. And I picked this book for the first prompt, which is read about a local celebrity or specialty. You choose the level of locality. I was very wrong to choose this book, even though it bears the name of my state in the title, because it is not about Wyoming at all, which was maybe the thing that made me the angriest about this book. So just to give you a little bit of background, Ken Mansfield, who I believe is in his 80s now, grew up in rural northern Idaho. Not exactly sure how northern, but we'll get to that. And he wanted to be a record producer from, early on, before he even really knew what that meant to be. He leaves Idaho and eventually makes his way into the music business. And very, very early on in his career in the music industry, he is selected to be the U.S. manager for the Beatles. And I kind of feel like maybe that was a downfall for him in his life, because he started so high, right? Like, who does not know who the Beatles are, right? I got this book because I thought that I would connect to it. I thought it was going to be, well, the subtitle of the book is My God and an iPod on the Open Road. So I thought it was going to be about a road trip, maybe around Wyoming or the Rocky Mountains, something like that. And I wasn't so sure that I would connect to the music part of it, because even though I really enjoy music, I'm not super up with like famous artists or who sings what song, that kind of thing. But I also thought, well, he's clearly going to talk about his faith in this book as well, which he does. Unfortunately, he doesn't talk about it very well. But I really can't stress to you enough how frustrating it is. I never would have picked up this book if it weren't for the title. Now, Mark Nash pointed out to me yesterday in my Friday Reads video that authors don't always get to choose their titles, or even like what's the back of the book. That kind of material, they don't often get to decide what that is. So Ken Mansfield may not have chosen the title Between Wyomings, but I can tell you I had to read a long time before I figured out why anyone even chose that. So this book is about 300 pages long. Page 217, he's talking about his road trip, with his wife. When we pull onto Interstate 80 in Lincoln, it will be all about making time and distance until we reach Cheyenne, Wyoming. He kind of talks about how he sort of romanticized Wyoming as when he was growing up. And then he says, when I was 12 years old, we drove from our home in northern Idaho to Pennsylvania to visit where my mom and dad grew up, the little town of Noxon, where I was born. Noxon is located in Pennsylvania's Wyoming County. Moving west, I find myself between those two Wyomings. My God. He barely even drives through, and even he drives through part of the state, but he doesn't spend a lot of time on it. Clearly, if it's a 217 of a 300-page book, and it certainly doesn't seem to have any impact on his music industry career. Now, as I said, he started out with the Beatles. But this is really about his journey in country music. And in spite of where I live, I don't really listen to country music. I didn't grow up listening to country music. So a lot of the artists that he mentions, aside from super famous people, Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, I don't know who these artists are. I mentioned to Jason, he's talking about some artist, Waylon Jennings. Who's that? And Jason was like, Waylon Jennings was a huge, huge country star. So I will link to one of Waylon Jennings' songs down below for you so you can kind of see the sort of music that Ken Mansfield was really interested in during this phase of his life. And but if I had known that this was going to be about a kind of music that I'm probably the least familiar with, I certainly wouldn't have read it. Again, so it's not about my state. It's not about a place places I'm familiar with. And then the kind of music that he's really into is not the kind of music that I am into. And I will say, really, if you love the Beatles, this is definitely not the book for you, because he spends extremely little time discussing the Beatles in here at all. He has written multiple other books about his relationships with all of the Beatles, but it's a couple paragraphs or an anecdote here and there. It's not much about the Beatles. So we go on this merry-go-round of the road trip itself. Then the iPod shoots us back in time to part of his country music journey, and then it moves around to his faith with God. Now, when he met his fourth wife, he was not a Christian. He did grow up in a church-going home, but Ken Mansfield didn't really like church growing up. He had very much a fire and brimstone kind of pastor, so I can understand why. Maybe he didn't really want to be part of the church. These alternate chapters are about spiritual experiences that he has with Jesus, with God. He even describes what he thinks Jesus looks like. And I will just say straight up, and I don't mean I do really, really want to promote kindness on here, but the kind of faith that Ken Mansfield has looks very different from the kind of faith I have. And I think one of the huge challenges is trying to write about spiritual experiences that anybody has in any faith. I think it's really, really difficult to come across as sincere, to not sound spacey or just crazy. I have had experiences like that in trying to articulate to someone else just sound ludicrous. But I know in my heart and in my head what happened and what was going on. But the purpose of this channel has never been to talk about my faith. So let's stick to Ken here. So I once upon a time spoke kind of the evangelical language that Ken Mansfield uses in those chapters, but I don't use it anymore. And, he even talks about how difficult it is to describe those moments. He compares it to the color of the wind, which I thought was unfortunate given, that's a song in Pocahontas. Takes me to Disney. And then he goes on to say, but like the wind, it is something very real, something you can feel, and each time you experience its mystery, it has its own hue and tone. And I can agree with that. Again, I'm not on the same wavelength as Ken Mansfield is when he's talking about his faith. To describe Jesus as tan, that was so disappointing to me. Jesus was an Arab, people. He lived in the Middle East. his skin was dark. He was not pasty white like me. He didn't need a tan. His skin was naturally dark, olive colored. So things like that, again, really bothered me. So I think title, type of music, and maybe his own brand of faith, all I found off-putting. Probably give this book 1 star. Goodreads won't let you get away with no stars, right? If you are someone who is really interested in this kind of country music, then that would maybe be the only person that I would recommend this book to, and I would say only read the parts about the music industry and skip the faith chapters, which sounds very, very strange. I would like to recommend a book, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, that is also about the music industry and is also about faith. And that is a biography of Rich Mullins called An Arrow Pointing to Heaven by James Bryan Smith. It has been a long time since I've read this. I may need to reread this in 2021. He was very genuine in the way he talked about his faith, in the way he talked about the music industry, and the way he lived his life. His most famous song, which some of you may have heard, is called Awesome God. But he, in spite of the probably multi-million-dollar song that was, he chose to live among the poor on a Native American reservation, and he had his manager give him an annual salary of $30,000 a year. And to me, that is really walking the walk. So again, I learned about the music industry a little bit, the Christian music industry, from this book, and it's much more, I guess, on my page. So those are just a few thoughts. I really appreciate you listening. I'd love to hear if you feel like you've ever been deceived or tricked by a book cover maybe, perhaps even. And it could be a good story. It could be that you thought the title was terrible or the cover was terrible, and then it turned out to be an amazing book. I'd love to hear that too. So book 2, remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.